Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jordan with the Laundromat Resource Podcast. This is show 141, and I'm pumped you're here today because today we have on my two newest Twitter friends, or X. Dang it. It's not Twitter anymore. It's X. My two newest friends from X, Jon Schemmel and Whitey. Two guys that you are going to love. Both super different experiences in this industry, but this one is just jam-packed. John's got 14 laundromats in the last 3 years, 0 to 14 in 3 years. And Whitey is also killing it and just fountain of knowledge, really. So you're going to love this episode, and there's a lot packed into it. So we're just going to jump right into it today on the Laundromat Resource Podcast. Let's do it. Whitey and Jon, thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you guys doing today?
Pretty good, Jordan.
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Jordan.
I'm doing awesome. I'm going to have to address you guys each by name so that you guys know when to talk and when not to talk. So, Jon, how are you doing?
Great, man. I've got my red coat on. We've got the company Christmas party tonight at the local dive bar in Sioux City, Iowa. So this is the beautiful Hard Rock Hotel and Casino here that I'm hoping the craps table is nice later.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, dude. Nothing like some Christmas 100%. Crafts going on. Pay for that holiday party. I love it. Awesome. Well, hey, super pumped to have you guys on and to hear a little bit about your stories and wisdom you've gained from being in this industry. And we've got a lot to talk about. We did a little pre-chat before we hit record here, and there is a lot going on between the two of you guys. So let's jump into it. Whitey, you mind starting us off and just telling us a little bit about who you are and how you got into this business?
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me, Jordan. So born and raised New Englander, was feeling a little too close to the edge when COVID hit, was starting to explore some small business opportunities aside from my day job, stumbled upon your podcast, stumbled upon a bunch of different forums, and found that the laundromat industry was something that wasn't going anywhere, was really intriguing, and ultimately fell into a store via a mutual connection and haven't looked back since.
Awesome. Well, that was a good teaser overview. We're going to have to dig into how you, quote unquote, fell into a laundromat in a second. But Jon, give us a background on you.
Yeah, man, born and raised in Mississippi. Actually, son of a laundryman. Actually sang that at my brother's wedding. He was a make-that distributor, so grew up collecting quarters. Had a good long corporate career, managing business units in a manufacturing company kind of around South America, North America, and moved to the true Midwest up here, God's country, in Iowa, South Dakota, Nebraska. My wife's from here, and I told her, I said, we're going to try our own thing, and bought a laundromat / self-serve car wash in September 2020. And now we are at 11 stores, soon to be 14 in January.
All right. So as you can see, we have Whitey, who is tripped into a laundromat somehow, and Jon, who has fallen into almost 14 now over the last couple of years. So that's insanity. And we're definitely going to have to dig into that. So, Whitey, can we start with you, man?
Absolutely. So I started reaching out to different business owners in my area. And one of the biggest things I can recommend to folks is network. You never know who owns a laundromat. In my case, I reached out to a really close family friend who is in a related but not direct business to laundromats, and was just picking their brain, asking, if they knew anybody in the laundromat business, if they knew any for sale, and if they could keep me in mind. The response was, I have one, it's for sale. Would you like to get a deal done? It then became a mad dash to sitting down, looking over everything, understanding what was I getting myself into very quickly. And the next thing I knew, we were on a folding table on a raw Saturday fall in New England, and we were executing documents for me to take over about a week later.
Holy cow. Well, listen, there's a lot of people right now who are looking for laundromats to buy that are extremely jealous because it is difficult to find deals right now for a lot of people, and asking a family friend if they know anybody and them just sort of saying, hey, I got one right here for you. It's like dream scenario right there. What kind of due diligence did you do? I mean, you were sort of learning on the fly, it sounds like, as you're going through this process. What did that look like for you?
Funny you would ask that, Jordan. I was driving around in my area looking at laundromats, going in. I was doing laundry at laundromats, just trying to figure out what went into being in a laundromat as a customer, thinking that if I can understand it from customer's point of view, then operationally understanding, what breaks, what doesn't break. When this opportunity had presented itself, I had driven by this laundromat more times than I care to admit in my life and didn't even realize it was there. Didn't even realize, knowing that owner. And it was one that I had overlooked in my research. There were, several others that I had really spent some time in and, really got familiar with. And when I was awoken to this opportunity, it was, okay, let me, swing over there. What information do you have for me? They were really generous with a bunch of different information around, water bills, electrical, gas, and then just, collections reports. And, it was totally coin only store, a lot of out of order signs, a lot of TLC needed. And it was one of those situations where, putting together everything that was provided and then understanding the need for, some improvements. And when I say improvements, simple things, just slapping a coat of paint on every wall, getting new light bulbs, a new open sign, automatic doors that unlock on time every day and lock at night, putting the lights on a timer, just little things that I looked at as I don't want to be coming every day to lock and unlock the door. So that was part of my due diligence, was how do I take this over and make it as easy as possible for the highest customer experience, but the highest ROI for my time and investment right off the jump from the get-go post-purchase.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll get more into that sort of automation piece of it, because I think that is, that's something where I think we're moving as an industry as a whole, whether you're unattended, attended, partially attended, the more that we can automate. It's not just in our industry, obviously, it's all over the place, but the more we can automate, the more it frees us up to do things that are more valuable with our time, right? And you're kind of mentioning, like return on investment, but also return on time invested, right? And, I think a lot of us don't think about it that way, right? But we want, as business owners, we should be looking at what kind of return are we getting for the time that we're putting into this business and growing it and stuff. So I definitely want to dig into that automation and how you were able to sort of set this store up and turn it around from what it was. Sounded like it was pretty much like a zombie mat, and you've been able to turn that around. So we're going to get into that if you're okay with that. But John, can you give us a little, narrative on how you found that first one and then started rolling into more?
So it kind of boils back to my wife and I started having kids back in 2017. So when that time frame was happening, actually my brother-in-law, now partner, and I just started talking. I kind of was looking for, I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, I was kind of looking for a lifeline eventually to move back here, knowing that kids need to grow up near their cousins. So I had actually engaged with a business broker here in Sioux City. And we looked at all kinds of stuff, man. We looked at a dental lab. Actually, one of the laundromats we own, I looked at in 2017, but it wasn't kind of at the scale to, obviously, one store to take care of it. So, kind of fast forward to, actually Dylan and I ended up buying a multiplex, a triplex. That was kind of our first business venture. But long story, one came up through this broker. It was the car wash laundromat. And so that was the catalyst. So we got that. And then we started hunting around that particular area. And there's one 5 blocks down that actually it was just timing, but the owner had a health issue. Her son wanted to close down the store. It was closing down as we approached them. So we're able to acquire that in the same time frame, as well as the one that I had seen in 2017. We ended up landing that. So we actually bought 3 within a period of about 40 days. And I had a full-time job at the time, so did my partners. So we had no idea what we were getting into, even though, I kind of grew up in it a little bit. But yeah, so that was kind of the catalyst and the start. I did the dual. I played basically the operating manager, operating partner here, boots on the ground, and completely underestimated everything. The returns were good, numbers were good, but for the first year, first 9 months, kind of back to like what Whitey was talking about, making it passive and return on time. I worked 100% in the business. It was every collection, so on and so forth, that it clouded my vision on working on the business. We used to say that in corporate all the time. How much time are you working in or on? And so I started subbing things out, sold all the vending machines and said, you take care of it. I just want a royalty on that. Et cetera, et cetera. I got a gal, that kind of started doing all the collections. That freed up my time. And then I realized I was severely underpriced. Versus other areas, and we had bills going to the moon. So that core of 3 laundries and a car wash kind of it was the main catalyst. Number 4 came from the seller of number 3, and number 5 and 6 came from the seller of number 1. So we kind of cultivated that relationship, stayed in touch, and then after that, it was just hunting. So it's kind of turned into, we've actually gotten 2 for free. That's another long story. But primarily cold calling other stores in the area. We built an infrastructure here, and we just wanted to kind of build around it. So we went from, we had 6 in June of this year, and we'll have 14 in January. We're in the middle of it right now.
You are moving. Well, and I want to talk a little bit. I want to get into some of like the growth pains,
Sure.
if there are any, from scaling that quickly. Because I think, scaling anything that quickly, you've got to learn some things real fast to be able to manage all of that, for sure. Yep. So we'll get into that too. All right, Whitey, let's bounce back to you. So, you mentioned already that there was a lot of machines out of order and all that stuff. Can you talk to us about sort of like the condition and maybe like what the actual acquisition was like? Price point ish that you got in. Did you finance it? How did all that work for you?
So it was pretty interesting, walking into this specific location. The other ones I had been into, I had never seen so many of out of order signs or machines that potentially were older than I was. So when I think about the due diligence, talking just about the actual machines themselves, it was a little bit of a case of, okay, what do I not know about what's going on? How do I read a distributor label to understand how old these machines are, if those are even the right stickers? I still believe some of the stickers may have been intentionally defaced by a couple owners before, because distributors now have written in Sharpie the correct one. They weren't off. They were only off by a couple of years. One of those things that could have been a casualty of machine use, etc. But to your point, not to get too specific, but under 100K was my acquisition price. Again, this was really a purchase of the infrastructure at the end of the day, based on what I have done in the couple years of ownership. I have had to retool. I just recently put in the paperwork to retool pretty much the whole thing in the second phase. First phase really needed, I didn't have really any large capacity machines, the dryers, if you did higher medium heat. So that were some of the concessions made. There was some creative financing based on some milestones that I encourage folks to, make a couple different offers, especially if you're first one, to test what the seller may be interested in. In my case, with it being somebody that I know really well, and it wasn't as much of a negotiation or pursuit that most people talk about. I'm sure John can share stories of a lot of back and forth. In my case, it was, how do I get comfortable with what I'm about to take over that I don't know? how do I help this individual out with taking this off their hands, but also understand what's going to actually go into my takeover to make this an entity that has almost doubled in size in a couple years. And part of what I tell everybody is you're going to get kicked in the mouth a couple times. You're going to, have days where you want to just curl up in the fetal position. It does get better. You just have to do the little things every day, keeping the place clean, because when you start off just repainting the place, keeping it clean, and then slowly make improvements, people in the laundry business do not miss a thing. I took the clock off the wall for daylight savings time a couple weeks ago and received 3 calls on the laundromat phone asking where the clock on the wall was. So people quickly noticed when I took over. I painted the place quickly. Machines out of order signs were coming off. I put up a sign mentioning improvements coming. The security system went in. The sense of safety, security, cleanliness helped buy me time to order new machines and retool that I think most folks may have thought I was crazy. I think some of my customers still think I just am a high risk gambler. But I have seen the fruits of the efforts of taking a risk, going into the unknown, and then understanding the goals of now trying to get to John's level of constantly looking at deals and saying, now I know what's going on. I have the comfort level that you aren't just born with. Maybe John was born with it, I think, based on his dad being a laundryman and him having, 14 in a couple years. But
Also, a high
you've got to
risk
have some
gambler.
personal faith.
Yeah, you just got to desensitize
You've got
yourself.
to desensitize yourself. You've just got to believe in your own process. And I think the biggest thing that I had to realize very quickly those first few nights, I'll never forget the first night when I locked the doors when I still had manual locks, was this is going to take a couple years. It's a long-term plan. This isn't takeover where it's going to change in a month or 2 months or 3 months. I built out a soft 5-year plan of the first 3 years are going to totally revamp. By year 5, I want this thing to be the premier store within 100 miles by store size. I have some bigger, corporate competitors as you get closer to some of the major metropolitan cities in my area, but I wanted to be the small individual store that people said, wow, I could eat off the floor, get clean laundry, and be out of there in the most efficient manner possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that, and I love that mindset too. I'm gonna ask you something, and if I don't know, I'm just curious about your perspective on this, because I see this, and you probably see this a lot too on social media channels or forums and stuff. So there's a school of thought that would say, don't ever pay $40,000 for a rundown laundromat. Why would you ever do that? That's there's all the machines are broken and yada yada yada. And so I'm curious. I personally do not subscribe to that mindset, but a lot of people do. And so I'm curious as to why you felt like, okay, and I know you got it for under 100K, you got a good deal on it, but I'm curious why you paid money for a laundromat with a bunch of broken machines.
When I look back at the time, I didn't have all the answers. Now that I look back, the prevailing theme in both scenarios of due diligence, post ownership, now a couple years into ownership, is when you look at building out a laundromat, there's a lot that goes into it. And when you think about just getting city permitting or township permitting wherever you are, you think of Mark Vlaskamp, good friend down in Austin, posted a picture of drilling drain lines. The investment that it takes to build a brand new store versus acquiring an existing store has a massive delta. It's already hooked into city water and sewer. It's already got the gas meter. It's already set up for a laundromat. And when I think about that question and I see folks, questioning buying some of these rundown zombie mats, is $40,000 was just the price that some people pay to get a drain line installed.
Oh, yeah.
So I looked at it from the perspective of, even if I take out every single one of these machines, I already have everything hooked up to then put in new machines. So when I further think about this and I see some of the posts on social media, and I try sometimes to comment and guide people to the light of there's nothing wrong with a turnover project. The risk associated with a turnover project at under 100K versus starting a brand new build and getting into multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's a mindset shift in terms of, the plumbing, drains, and gas hookup is easily worth over 100K.
Hey, Whitey.
The infrastructure, being able to handle it, is worth another 100K. So it starts adding up quickly. Sorry, John, go ahead.
I was going to add on top of even the capital or the physical infrastructure, I mean, a new laundry is expensive, guys, but you have to acquire a customer base. So like we bought one that was closed down, and it was our second one. I was like, oh, we're just going to turn the lights back on. And it was actually in decent shape. And I think our first week we did like $75. And so not only you can build a brand new one, and I've got 2 pretty new stores that we acquired. And I looked back at the data from when it was started. The first year wasn't exactly like a home run financial success because people need to hear about it. So you have a year or 2 of burn just from just getting traffic if you can compete. So I think because you're not exactly, Whitey, would you say that every day that more laundromat customers are made? I think there are some delivery. I think there's some other things that can create new laundromat customers, but your traditional core self-service laundromat, I don't think there's new ones being made every single day. So you kind of have a finite customer base.
You have a finite customer base until people can't get parts or repair in and fix a machine. And I think to your point, I wasn't even taking that into account in my due diligence. That was just gravy on top. I look at it from a perspective of I'm in a very competitive area. And one of the big draws that I have is I have doubled down and just continue to reinvest, whereas the owners around me have been forced to invest in different infrastructure or machines based on my arrival on the scene. And that's caused some problems in my area because folks have now seen the other options. In my case, my store wasn't listed anywhere. The only place you found my store, if you knew the entity name in the Secretary of State's website and the state it's registered in, that's the only way you knew my store existed. We weren't even in the yellow pages as far as I'm concerned because they changed the name a couple times. So acquiring a customer base is such a head start, even if you have to do some creative understanding of, hey, there's going to be some price changes. There's going to be some infrastructure changes. Machines may not be there that you love. Folks that are core laundromat customers have a way of doing things. And my heavens, do they not want to be bothered or told how to do something differently? Whether the softener pellets deserve to go in a machine or not, they do not care because they saw it on TV. So it's, the little things where, just having them come in the door, be happy they're in the door. Deal with shop vacuuming those pellets out as much as you have to, as long as they're coming in every week and they're happy.
Those little pellets are a nightmare, though. Somebody should fire the person who invented those. Yeah. All right. So Whitey, you paid, somewhere under $100,000 for a store, a zombie mat. John, you mentioned you've gotten a couple of quote unquote free laundromats. Do you think Whitey is dumb for paying for this laundromat, or should you try to get it for free, or what's your perspective on this? I'm trying to stir up some controversy, I guess.
No, I think so our business model isn't solely laundromats. It's what we've scaled in. I think acquiring businesses that are already operating and improving them is absolutely versus maybe new build. We prefer that route. We haven't done a new build on our own. Again, I kind of think about laundromat space. I feel like there's a finite group of customers that if you just make their experience clean, efficient, and friendly, so machines working, be cleaner than everybody else and be friendly. You can turn a zombie mat into, we did it here. Our third one, I think it was 2/3 out of order. and it's an 18 washer store. So we partnered with the distributor, basically front row when you walk in was all new touchscreen washers, threw those in there, fixed everything else, and revenue's up almost 5x on what we bought it. It took a long time, but when you walk in, it's clean. It appears to be pretty new after some new equipment. So I think, if you gave me the choice of acquiring, taking the Whitey scenario, or I'm going to go compete and build, a $1.4 million laundromat, I'm going Whitey scenario all day, every day. That's our model.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, what you said took a while to get to 5X. You have like a ballpark, how long? Because I think that's something that a lot of people miss, especially in that sort of zombie mat takeover, rehab, free or not free, either way. Like, I think a lot of people miss that time it takes. Like you said, it's not
Right.
turn the key. If you build it, they will come. You're profitable day one. Do you have a ballpark on like what that's taken your stores?
That particular store, I'm looking at my computer here. We closed on it December 1st, 2020. And today's December 7th, 2023. And we're at, that 5X is kind of what we're running this quarter. So call it, a good 3 years. But we were pretty quick on it. We definitely saw, it's funny. I have like a couple examples. So that was the third store. Really, the bump we saw was putting in some new machines pretty quickly. And we saw an fairly instant bump, but it wasn't like a massive shift. The other massive revenue bump I saw, like significant revenue bump, because, we're looking at this daily. I really like to look in weekly buckets. But store number 2 that was closed down from the lady that had the health issue. Most people, you drive by it. When I first saw it, I thought it was an old dive bar. Like there's no sign on it that said laundromat. So we just, got the big blue block letters. I got a buddy that's a sign guy, so he came over and hung that up. And it's near like an RV park where people, camp and stuff, campground. And literally the revenue the next week doubled. And so you're in there and you're talking to people that are like, yeah, I just turned off the bridge and saw that there's a laundromat right there. So it's funny that, back to Whitey's point on doing some basics, literally putting a sign on your business on telling people what it is can significantly help even in today's like world of technology.
I think one thing to add to that in terms of accessibility, I view being open 365 days a year as paramount to my business.
Yeah.
I quickly found when I took over, there was a holiday approaching that all the other stores in the area were closed. I acquired customers because they drove by and saw the lights were on. And now every holiday, Thanksgiving was a couple weeks ago, I had a normal day's volume because people know that unless my utilities are shut off, I will be open, hell or high water. And that type of accessibility for consistency when folks need clean laundry and they, position their week around clean laundry, it makes a big difference. So John talking about pulling off the highway, seeing it's there, having it on your door that you are open 365 days a year and these are your hours.
Yep.
Makes a massive difference for customer perception. They're not wondering, oh, shoot, we got a holiday coming up, got to pack this all in. Or in other cases, I have a lot of folks that have non-traditional jobs or may not have family to spend time with, and this is cathartic for them to go get laundry done on a holiday. And I implore everybody that can be open on a holiday to open. I look at that as you're costing yourself money if you're closed on a day that you may not view as a laundry day for yourself, but others view it as, oh, sweet, maybe nobody's there. I'll get, a couple loads of laundry done.
Hey, Whitey, can I add on to that? So the first year we had it, we're a couple months into this thing, and my strategy has generally been run it how it's been run for the first 3 months, figure everything out, and then you start making changes. But previously, right, wrong, or different, that particular laundromat, our first one, had closed every Christmas. And with the logic of like, and it's good logic, who wants to call on Christmas? I've got, kids and stuff, and you don't want to call. But I found, and it's a 24/7 store, I found it was more of a pain to coordinate closing the 24/7 store the day before, and who's going to do it on Christmas Eve, and getting the versus just leave the thing open and handle a call. Generally, if you do get a call, you can either, if you don't do it that day, just say, hey, hook up with me tomorrow, we'll take care of it, or I'll refund you on the app or whatever. But I thought it was more of a, talk about return on time. You were kind of talking about that in the pre-work. Like, all those little things add up because you have to spend time coordinating it. And you take it away, leave it open, you're getting revenue, and you don't have to coordinate it.
Yeah. I mean, I found that my laundromats, both of which stay open on holidays, too. I mean, they actually tend to do pretty well. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people actually, the holidays can be rough on people a lot of times, and sitting at home for some people is like the last thing they want to do, right? So having some place they can go do, even if it's just go do laundry and maybe see some other neighbors or whatever, is actually a little bit cathartic and good for a lot of people. So I'm surprised at how many people do them on the holidays, even on New Year's. They're out partying the night before. I don't know. Okay, so Whitey, can we jump into a little bit of like your automation? I mean, I know when we were talking beforehand, like you're like getting all revved up. You're like, yes, automation. Can we talk a little bit about automation? What kinds of things are you doing to increase that return on time / decrease your time commitment to your laundromat?
So first thing I do, used my current store as the model, but when I go look at an acquisition, or the first things I'm looking for is what is in place that requires manual intervention to open or close every day. So starting off, to open a store, you got to unlock the door, turn the lights on, flip the open sign on. Worked with a local locksmith that put in timed locks. So one of the big reasons this is important is laundromat customers do not have the patience if the store doesn't open on time every day, nor should they, especially if the employee that didn't hear their alarm go off and they're waiting outside for the store to open. So first thing I did before anything was I put in automatic door locks, and that's something that any future acquisition there'll always be. Helps make sure things run smoothly, they're easy to program, etc. Second thing was the open sign. Nothing is worse than not having an open sign and people wondering if you are or not open. I didn't have the big stickers and signs on my doors yet. So my open sign was crucial, especially the positioning of my store needed the visibility of an open sign. So I bought a $10 Wise plug at Home Depot, fired that thing up through my Wi-Fi, clicks on a timer. The last thing that I did, and the story behind how this all came together is actually really funny. I put in automatic lights, put in a Lutron system, hire an electrician, do not do it yourself, do not play YouTube Monday Night Electrician to anybody, because if you fry these plugs, they're not easy to justify replacing. If you go right back to Home Depot and say, hey, this doesn't work, they're going to know you fried them. But my store is amongst a lot of different businesses. And one of the things that was very hard when I took over was establishing a reputation with anybody in the trades. You're a new business owner. You have no business references. I was cold calling anybody in the trades outside of my network of folks that I knew would do things. Nobody had availability. I ended up seeing an electrical business pull up near the store and chased the guy into a coffee shop. It was like, hey, I've got a really simple project for you. I really need this. Can you help me out? He came in. He said, this is what you need. I'll go buy it right now. I'll be back tomorrow. This is the invoice. Everything comes on automatically, so it's all in sync. If you're sitting outside of my store at 5:59, I call it the show. You hear the click of the door, the open sign, and the lights all come on at 6 on the dot. So that's just table stakes automation in terms of making it so easy when your customers get there. the store is theirs no matter when they come in, or if they're coming in at 6 or they're getting out of there at 9. I've had folks say the lights shut off as they were walking out, and it was a little creepy. Further that, what I have also put into place is I have installed FastCard CCI F3 readers on every machine. One of the reasons why I specifically went with the F3s is I have the ability to restart every machine from anywhere in the free world that I have access to the CCI management console for owners. So when I think about a customer experience, somebody calls me with an issue. Hey, I'm not getting any drum activity. My clothes didn't spin out. What do we do? I tell them, hey, is machine number, etc., the same size available? I have them move everything over. I can auto dispense via the F3 reader soap out of the soap machine if they need a soap for free. I can start them up for free. This has cut down on my need to cut checks for reimbursements. This has increased satisfaction because they know I can help take care of them right away. One of the biggest complaints I heard was, folks trying to get reimbursements at different laundromats is always a pain. Some owners take the stance of, I'm not reimbursing you. Some owners take the stance of, I'll take some time reimbursing you. I always, in most cases, believe that people come to me with good intentions and that they're getting a reimbursement because there's an actual issue with the machine. I'm not always there, so I can't, verify the issues, but I look at the customer acquisition and keeping them happy as paramount to my success, and anything I can do, being able to just flip that machine and rewash their clothes or start up a dryer if they need a couple more minutes. And sometimes you have to bite the bullet. Sometimes you don't want to give that freebie away, or you don't want to lose $1. But think if they go to your competitor and they're a $20 a week customer, and you look at a year, $20 a week, and you watch them walk out the door because you wanted to save, $8 on a washer. You're playing short-sighted games for a long-term business that getting that customer back in the door is going to be 10 times as hard if you can even get their time of day. They've probably written a Facebook review or told their friends that it wasn't a great experience, and you're just hurting yourself at that point.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there are different sort of philosophies on that refunds thing, but I'm aligned with where you're at. And hey, long term, if they're paying $20, $20 a week, was that like $1,000 a year essentially? So what's the saying? Like, don't trip over dollars to pick up pennies. Is that
That's how I've looked at this business. Is if you make a short-sighted move that you don't really want to do, but try to get them back, it's one of those things where that reputation gets out there. I have had people say, I've heard that you have taken care of issues or you tackle problems head on. I look at this as, I want to give the best service possible to folks so that my service quality is never questioned, my integrity is never questioned, and that they know they get used to how I've operated it and there's no questions on that. And that goes a long way for people. And, I've had people say, I wasn't really sure if I liked how you were doing things, or, I saw that you raised your prices a little bit. They realize the price increases, in my case, coincide with investment in the business. And they have learned that when I do something, I increase, and that it's with the cause, versus some owners increase because Johnny down the block went up and increased, or they got smoked with a bill they weren't expecting, or insurance costs. You see a lot in California. They're having a lot of issues with insurance. Folks are making potentially irrational price increases that customers really question, versus I retooled, I went up a little bit. I needed to price correct based on my market because I was far below everybody else. I have retained the customers that I'd like to retain because of that relationship, versus a random increase because I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and said, reset every fast card, add 50 cents and call it a day.
Hey, Whitey, can I challenge you a little bit on that? Because, the most optimal time, obviously, to raise prices is if you do invest in the business. right? You're trying to get a return on the new equipment, and you're trying to pay it off or whatever it may be. But I would say the last couple of years are a little bit unique in maybe price increases without showing something visible in the store that's new, mainly just with input cost pressures. I mean, it's happened in every single business, kind of like you were saying with insurance. Insurance is way up. I mean, our trash bill has like gone up 3x, fuel, et cetera. Even our water bills are up, 20%. So I think there's still a way appropriately. I mean, you got to run a business, right? You got to run a P&L. So there's still a way to communicate that, and we've been, I'd say, fairly successful at it. We try and at least give our staff talking points as to why, and it has been either input cost induced or to your point, we've retooled the store, so we try and charge those services. But I do think, man, maybe the last couple of years are a little bit unique, but you've definitely got to still take into account the input cost pressures and run that, run your P&L.
I like to call it surge pricing when my utility provider, it gets cold in the Northeast and gas and electric go through the roof for 5 months a year, and then it levels out. And to your point, John, it's my price increases related to, input pressures have also coincided with an investment.
Right.
So not to be overlooked, and great point, I just have dumb lucked into that lining up. But yes, I think folks should take into consideration, we're not running a charity, although I know some folks do a lot of charitable work, not saying they shouldn't, but still a business to run. And, you want to make sure folks keep coming in the door, especially if, you need to handle something of an increase. Like you said, talking points in my case being unattended, mine's visual of, oh, the whole store now has credit card readers on it. There was a little price increase. Totally get it. He just invested more in this. And oh, by the way, those machines are brand new. Those weren't here last week. Now I understand what's going on.
Yeah, it has been a couple of unique years. I mean, so my side job is day trading a little bit and playing some stuff in the stock market, particularly around commodities. And so I follow natural gas. And so I personally invest in I'm not currently invested, to be fully clear, but generally I watch natural gas trusts and some different things. And I always said it was a hedge for me. But I mean, natty gas got up to, I think it was like $8 BTU. And normally it's around 2 or 3. So, I mean, we definitely, every utility kind of hedges differently, but those are just invisible costs that the owner, either you take it or you try and pass it on. And it's just something that it's never fun, but it's part of the business.
I think, John, a good point you just brought up, and I think it's worth folks, especially new folks to the business, need to understand that a lot of laundromat customers are unlikely to be business owners and understand what goes into running a business of this kind. A couple examples that I think customers overlook are certain things like drain cleaning or, services that provide a top tier experience for them that they don't understand add economic pressure onto our P&Ls. And sometimes folks need to, and you have to position this and finesse this in a way that makes sense for your demographic. But when folks maybe make a comment about pricing, I have a gentleman, every time I have a price change, I get a phone call. I wait for the phone call because I know it's coming. It's kind of our running joke now. But he knows I am investing. Have a prepared understanding of what you'd like to tell folks.
Yeah.
In my case, I have rotting cast iron I've got to take care of. That's not something I'm going to tell a customer because that's just a cost of doing business. But when I have to redo plumbing and electrical for one of my islands and have to close and then have a slight increase, I'm going to say, hey, folks, was not prepared for the plumbing and electrical to be up. The price of copper is fluctuating. To John's point, there's different things add up. And then folks don't realize, some of the tradesmen that I work with, I'm paying these folks their experience. I'm paying for first time fix. I've got a lot of friends in the trades that are there because I call and say, hey, I need this done. And it gets done quickly and it maximizes my uptime versus downtime. Some folks put off expenses related to infrastructure or needed updates because they want to go with the cheapest person or they want to do it themselves. And there's something to be said about finding that balance, but also making customers aware of, hey, we're good now for another 35 years of cast iron drains. Sorry for the eyesore for a couple of weeks, but we're back, we're moving. Your stuff's not going to have any issues. There's not going to be, stinky ramifications of drain lines that aren't clean. And that's something customers notice. I've heard folks have gone to other laundromats across the country. I sometimes get some travelers, depending on the time of year. You don't keep your place clean in every facet, drain lines, water lines. Folks notice when their clothes smell, and they're going to be going to the guy down the street.
Yeah, and I think there are some policies too that just help with whether, if we're going to talk about pricing, with price changes, right? So one of them is, I think the refund. We just talked about the refund policy. We generally are all. I'd say all three of us are probably in the same boat on how we do it. We usually side with, we just take care of the customer regardless. And every now and then you kind of catch a repeat offender that. So, but we try and take care of stuff quick and in real time. If you do that, the next time they come in and it's a quarter or whenever you do it, if it's a quarter higher, 50 cents higher, you almost never hear anything as long as you're taking care of the customer. It all goes back to customer experience. And people just want to get their clothes clean, man. And they want to do it in a safe, friendly, efficient environment, and they don't want to have any issues. They want to get out of there on the self-service side. So
this is great. You guys have just been
we
hammering it out back and forth.
You're getting a look into our daily group chat with Mark, Jordan. I mean, this is us just pinging ideas and picking each other's brains and just, trying to do what's best by our customers and run a solid business.
This is the filtered version.
I like it. And here's kind of how I'll just throw in my 2 cents on how I handle sort of that situation. My sort of philosophy on it is customers don't really care about your pipes or your electrical or whatever. They just care about themselves, really. And that's okay. Like, that's totally fine. So my sort of philosophy, if anybody does ask, like, hey, why are prices up and stuff like that, I try to keep it simple. And the more explanation I give, the more things I give them to potentially latch onto, to complain about more or to misinterpret or anything like that. So I just kind of keep things, just simple. And hey, like, we're making improvements here. We want to provide the best experience possible. And, cost of doing business. That's just part of what it takes to do that. And, if we don't raise our prices, then we're not going to be here very long, and you're going to have to find somewhere else that's inferior to go do your laundry. So I try to keep it simple, keep it direct, and keep it focused on them, because that's really what they want to hear anyways, is how's it going.
Hey, Jordan, the one thing I did use this with a customer, that we knew the customer, and I was like, man, I went to Wendy's today and they didn't tell me why they raised the $4 biggie bag to $5. Yeah, he just laughed at me. But it's true. Like, input costs, and guess what? You're probably never going to see a $4 biggie bag ever again.
Yeah, what's interesting is I can't remember. I want to say maybe Elizabeth Bricken Wilson. It's not a podcast guest I had back in the day. I can't remember who it was. It was probably a woman, though, because this sounds wise. So it's probably a woman who said it, if not Elizabeth. But she said, laundromats become an extension of your customer's home, right? They're doing this chore, this household chore, and it kind of becomes an extension of their home. And I wonder if that plays into why they feel okay about prying into, why prices are raised or why whatever at a laundromat, not at the gas station that changes every single day, or the fast food joint that, that they frequent or whatever. And I almost feel like it's a little bit of a compliment. Well, at least this is how I try to frame it in my own mind, so it doesn't drive me insane, of like, hey, they feel comfortable enough to say, hey, why are prices going up? It feels a little more personal.
Bit of laundry history, but I mean, that was a big, like, a lot of my dad's stores were branded as like home laundries. I mean, that was an actual 80s, 90s. And don't ask me beyond that. I just know they were called that. But I think we still have a lot of customers that are aged to where they've been going there since 1992, and I think that could probably play into it because literally, I mean, that was half the stores were like home laundries. That was the marketing.
Yeah. All right. So, okay. Somehow we got down all into here through the path of talking about automation. John, are you doing anything other than some of the stuff Whitey talked about? I mean, you've got a lot of stores now. You scale up quickly. You got that first one in 2020, you said, right? So we're 3 years in. Are you utilizing any other automation or similar automation?
We're really we're trying to do more. So I mean, when you acquire already operating businesses, we've got every brand of equipment under the sun. So some of that, like we have 2 stores, which got Extra Live. Actually, it's pretty good back end stuff, and kind of tells you when you're got water valve issues or whatever. So we've got Fast Guard in a couple stores, so that helps. But like on basic automation stuff, we're 24/7 pretty much across the board. So we catch some riffraff and stuff every night. So really where we started challenging ourselves, and me and my partners, particularly my brother-in-law and partner Dylan, was, how do we help manage that or put in systems and things like that in place. I think I told you before, he was coming up with a good playlist of like, we were just gonna, for people when we were sleeping and stuff at night, we were gonna target some music at them. And we read some stories too of where that worked. But we put
7-Elevens do that here. They'll play classical music real loud right outside.
So
out there. Yeah,
we just threw a post out on Twitter, man, and there was a couple guys that threw back some YouTube videos about Alexa and laundromats, and that got the wheels turning. So he took that and just ran with it. And so we've got Alexa in every store, so now we can make announcements. It also solved, we always thought our laundromats were kind of quiet, like sometimes eerily quiet. So we have kind of the grocery store background music. Right now it's all Christmas music playing in the back. But it takes a little bit of just that silent white noise out of the store. But we're able to kind of, type in messages and make announcements and beeps and stuff. And it's really, those guys have done a great job on that. But it's got also our wheels turning on what else could we automate and remotely manage. So light timers, kind of like Whitey was talking about. I had, this is on our list to do next year, but like all our coin changers, throwing smart plugs at them, to where if you ever need to like reset, sometimes you just got to hit the on off button inside there. So, you can just do a little power reset there as long as it's connected to Wi-Fi. We're getting our T-stats to where everything can be done on mobile. Pretty much anything that you either have to reset or, light timers. Most of the stores we bought are those old mechanical yellow wheel timers. So we're getting rid of those. We're in the we're like halfway through that, trying to get digital timers in there to where daylight savings times, it just automatically updates versus literally it was a task twice a year to go around and change all these yellow mechanical timers that, work 80% of the time. I think the mentality is anytime, and Whitey said it, anytime you got to go touch the store, ask yourself, is there technology or a system you can put in place to automate? That's kind of the technology side on the automation side. We've also put in systems management systems just to help manage. I mean, we do, we kind of have criteria around collections. We have different audit systems we've got. So it allows us to actually outsource tasks. But yeah, automation is we called it, we branded it internally, kind of across all the employees because we wanted ideas too. Just work smarter, not harder. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like you've got some good tech behind you. And I love that sort of the mindset of like, we're always looking for new things to implement into our industry. And I think there's probably a lot of opportunities for even stuff that's existing now, let alone stuff that's going to be coming out soon, to help us automate our businesses in creative ways. And one of the reasons I'm starting to ask that question more and more on the podcast is because I just think, sometimes we just get this stroke of genius and we don't really realize it's a stroke of genius till we share it and somebody's like, whoa, that's crazy. So I mean, like using the Alexa. I know you're not the only one to use Alexa out there, but I know there's also a lot of people who aren't using Alexa and don't have that, or automatic timers on their lights, or the change machines. I think that's a great idea if you got change machines, because like you said, sometimes you just got to reset those things, and either got to go all the way into the store or have a staff member do it, or you can just kind of hit the button on the app and reset.
I can add one more thing, and this is fairly new to us, but it's been a game changer from a management standpoint. Game changer so we hired a guy full-time January and brought him on. He got a little bit of equity in the company, but he's the primary operating partner for majority of our stores, and that's all he does. Great guy. But as we're doing this, and we're adding more stores, we have more things to do, right? Machines break, whatever it may be. Reports. There's just lots of tasks. So I'm kind of an analog guy. So I'm like, all right, we need to do a weekly meeting action item tracker, right? Super simple. I'm an Excel guy, so just here you go. Put colors in it, and we started that way, and we kind of got me and two of my partners, we kind of got our cadence down on every week. What do we got to hit? What's near term? What's midterm? What's long term? Whatever. Well, as we were growing, we're like, man, this thing's like not awesome to update on your phone and whatever. So we've transitioned all of our management, like action item trackers and stuff, to an app called Connect Teams. And it's just a task app. And what was wild was the day Dylan and I were talking about this. I had asked, I'm on the board of a buddy's company, and it's kind of a SaaS tech company. And I called him, and he's like, take a look at Connect Teams. That's what it sounds like, And at the same time, I get a text from Dylan. He's like, I found this app called Connect Teams. Great. So, but what's cool is we put everything in there now. So not only does it manage tasks, I can assign it to him. I can label it with the store. So you can search just for me and like what I need to do. So it does tasks really well, but it also has a chat function, kind of like what's the Slack. So we have it sectioned off by region. Now 14 stores. I do all the financials, so I got to see deposit slips in which store and all that kind of stuff. So we have that section off to where we have a picture of every deposit slip, et cetera. It's all in there versus me checking my text messages for when did Tyler send this thing. So it was one of those things that we kind of found it out of necessity because we found all these opportunities to grow. But now we're using it more as, wow, it's made our management lives a lot easier. So it's a platform to grow on. So now it's like, okay, if we take on 5 more stores and we take on 2 more managers, we put them all in the app, and it consolidates a lot of the dialogue and back and forth and your day a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's, that kind of rolls naturally into, what it's been like to scale that quickly, going from 1 to almost 14 stores now in 3-ish years. And like, what kinds of systems did you have to put in place? How did you build that team? Can you talk about some of those challenges?
So in the beginning, I think I'd said like I was kind of working in the business versus on, I feel like the first 9 months. And what that allowed me to do was I put a lot of focus around finding a guy, and I think Whitey kind of alluded to it, finding a guy or a gal or a company that, in Sioux City, I've got our HVAC guy, I've got our electrician, and we pay them on time, by the way. Like that's another thing in small business. People try and string out bills and stuff like that. If you just pay your vendors on time, they'll show up for you on a Sunday. Or you put a credit card on the file with them. Like just, so yeah, I think that was really critical, and it also is critical on my learning curve because now I feel I don't want to like beat my chest, but I don't get nervous about a laundromat problem anymore. Uh, whether it be a machine down or whatever, we have other resources that we can pull information from if we can't figure it out. There's a lot online, but we feel like we've gone through 85 to 90% of the scenarios over the last 3 years. So that just building that learning curve is also huge, huge, huge on scaling because then you can go teach it. So system wise, I mean, obviously setting up your collection schedules, finding somebody responsible for that. I would argue collecting can actually be more time consuming than maintenance. Everybody thinks about maintenance with laundromats.
Oh yeah,
Figuring out how to manage the money.
100% of your course. Well, I was going to ask you. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the collection. Like, how are you outsourcing that, and how are you? I think the big fear is like, right, if I outsource collection, somebody's going to skim off the top, and I'm not going to know. So how are you?
People
care about that, or?
Oh yeah, I definitely care about that. But I mean, people take. So I was challenged in that pretty early. Like, how are you gonna have somebody handle your money? And I'm like, well, Walmart does it. You just got to put in some type of system that you can go back and take a look at, or have multiple backup systems. So generally, we've got we're working towards every store having some form of electronic payment that then can track every quarter that goes in the machine. So then you can really audit um, around what the deposit should be. So that's kind of number one. Number two, in every American changer, it's got a counter. So again, simple. We put in the old Dollar Tree composition books in every changer. And every time that dollars are pulled from that machine, by the way, it's on camera, they go in the room, into the bag, and that bag needs to match exactly up to the delta between the prior collection and the number that they just wrote down. And then we just like inventory random sampling, we do that. And it also boils down to like who you're asking to do it. I mean, it's systems are great and automation's incredible. It's everything that you can't grow without those two things. You also can't grow without good people. So, obviously you want people collecting your money that you would entrust with your children. So, we really, we don't just let anybody obviously touch the money, but we definitely operate with the mindset of we won't be able to grow if John or Dylan have to go collect every quarter. So, but honestly, the book and the changer thing is pretty darn good because it literally matches to the dollar what that deposit should be. As simple as that sounds.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And no, I appreciate you sharing that part of it because I mean that's one of the big thing. Like people are like, I can't go on vacation because I can't outsource collections. Would you ever consider going all digital payment?
We've been
system?
Really,
because that's the other solution, right? Is go all digital, and even if you have a kiosk, it's much easier to track how much cash is coming in to like load a loyalty card.
I'm glad you asked that. I was just down in Daytona Beach like 2 months ago with my family, and I went to like an old school arcade with Cruising USA and stuff, and it had that. It had the kiosk. And it actually didn't even tell you. It just gave you a card with credits on it. You had no idea what a credit was worth. And it started every machine. So that my partners and I feel like I've personally talked to every laundromat payment company out there, and every one of them has strong strengths. I also feel that it's still early in the game on that. I think that there's some really strong ones that don't quite connect with certain. Like I have a hodgepodge of equipment manufacturers, so they all don't talk the same way to each other. And I think that, and I think the manufacturers are in the game too. You got Speed Queen's got its stuff, and Dexter's got it. Obviously, Dexter Live with an app payment. So, and I've heard nothing but great things about like LaundroWorks is totally coinless, right? So you still have to deal with cash. There's a difference. Like you talk about coinless versus cashless. We're in the heart of the Midwest, and this is still a very, very cash heavy area of commerce. It's a very big ag economy. People use cash here. So we were pretty close to thinking about piloting a coinless store, and we could still come in with cash. But we're kind of, I'll just say our strategy, we're not totally done with it yet. We're strategically going to punt for a couple of years, particularly around here. Like if, anything that happens here, technology, it's like 10 years behind what, Tampa, Florida does, or wherever, some major metro. So I think we have a little bit of time here. We have talked about in some of these smaller remote stores, maybe just doing app pay or whatever, but we're just, this is just still a very cash heavy part of the country. So I think it'll happen one day. Our strategy is we just want to be the ability to take card, not force customers to use card. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We're kind of in this like strategic hunting, and let's see where the chips fall in 2 or 3 years on that.
Do you incentivize the card payments where you have, or digital payments? Do you incentivize that at all to your customers?
We have one kiosk. We have our biggest store has fast card on every machine, and not to like go deep in the numbers, but this is also where like relationships help. So our card to coin here, this is a store with 42 washers, and it has a reader on every machine. They all work. I think there's one broken right now. We got to replace. And we're about a third credit card, and we have one small kiosk there. I won't get into it. I think we need to change the reader and stuff on it. It still works, but it's got some issues. But long story short, our stats, and this is kind of why we're strategically punting. Our stats at that store, it's our busiest store. When I called Whitey, I'm like, hey man, you've got a system now. What's your card to coin? He's like inverted. He's like 70% card, 30% cash. And then I spot checked it with some other guys too, and so we just we're just basically, our strategy is let's figure out how to manage the cash that's going to come in, but let's also give the ability to take a card or use an app everywhere. So
I think something worth calling out is when you are a coin store such as mine for as long as 30 plus years, coin only store, everybody else around has card readers. You start to get into the consumer perception of the credit card usage and how that all works. And when I first launched the card readers, it was a slog for the first 4 months. I only, to John's point of being 70-30, that has only really come full steam ahead now. Transitioning folks over to getting comfortable with the card reader, and they love the fact they can still use coin. Some folks will always use coin. We've started to finally turn the corner on the loyalty cards, and Jordan, I do incentivize folks to use the loyalty cards. I'm actually doing a special promo in December. I'm historically, January to November, it's 10% back on the loyalty cards. For December, I'm doing 20%. And what I did was I took the subset of customers that I knew had the loyalty cards on December 1st. I blasted it out to everybody, quick personalized. Hey, happy December. Here's, this month's promo. All of a sudden I logged into FastCard and was trying to figure out why everything was so screwed up. Everybody rushed to go load their cards up for the month on the first day, which obviously can help your P&L when, you've got folks that load the cards up. They love getting money back, and the customer perception of folks that you didn't think would be credit card users to load the loyalty card has shocked me. I think the adoption via credit card has actually made me question a lot of things. And what I mean by that is the younger generation under 50 seem to still be a cash friendly group. The over 50 crowd has picked the credit card reader adoption up and loyalty cards up very quickly. So everything I thought I knew had to go out the window when I started just noticing customers. And how did I notice it? They would leave the credit cards in the fast card readers. Can't tell you how many times I have walked by. When I am there, I just see a credit card hanging out the bottom of a machine. And I have to go find that person, or I have to sit around and wait for them to finish their load and say, hey, you missing something? And then look around and hand them their credit card back. And they love it because it's just so much easier than filling a pocket with folks doing $50 to $100. They're coming in with a huge Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee cup and filling the thing with quarters, and it weighs a couple pounds by the time they filled it up. Now they go start 7, 8 machines. They don't even blink. They just keep swiping. They're off to the races, and they're thrilled.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just need to thank you for including me in the younger demographic, the 50 and under, because I'm starting to creep in sometimes to that older demographic when people talk about that. I appreciate you keeping me in the younger demographic. So that's number one. Number two, I like that you're doing the incentives for the car. I mean, John, it might be something for you to consider actually, because management gets so much easier the more adoption of the digital. At least for me, that's been my experience. Like adoption of the digital payment just makes management at the store so much easier. So incentivizing that is, I'm a fan of that, especially as you're scaling so much, and it gets harder and harder to track all that cash.
I would agree with incentivizing awesome. That would we just haven't had like one platform kind of across the board, but we do with when we go to a solution to take card in an app and stuff. We're going to definitely incentivize for people to download the app, whatever. So we're still in ideation stage on this right now, pilot stage, I'd say.
Yeah, that's awesome. Love that. Okay. Anything else you feel like we need to talk about before we go into down to business?
I think one thing, John mentioned it, I think I touched on it at the top, Jordan, but just to reinforce point of, paying your, service providers on time, the response times that you receive just change. And I think to build that credibility quickly, paying quickly, throwing them, I've had a couple construction projects, buying the guys lunch. I think there's something to be said about building that team. I went to lunch with a gentleman recently, a gentleman named Ryan, that, has done a lot of work for me. And, one of the interesting things that I learned by way of talking to him was he has done work for me that he may not do for others because I'm a customer of his, elsewhere, residential. And one of the reasons is, there's that relationship that you've built with somebody that, it's not something he advertises, but he's willing to do the service for me because it's something he knows his guys can do. And, having those relationships, especially in this case, I had a lot of issues with trying to get somebody to perform the service he did for me. Having that relationship to make that call with the security of knowing it can get done and get done right is paramount to having that relationship to then call back again and say, hey, I've got other projects for you. It's now opened up another line of business for him and his folks that he may not have thought about or known about you as an owner. So, being really good with your, team, whether it's plumbers, HVAC technicians, electricians, drain folks, your distributors. And that's one other thought I just had on John talking about the team is really dig in and lean into your distributor. I know a lot of folks get caught up on Speed Queen versus Dexter on the Facebook groups. And at the end of the day, in my case, I went with the Speed Queen distributor in my territory because I had a better service experience, sales experience. And that has now, just morphed into being able to reach out to these people and getting down to business very quickly versus having to jump through hoops or not having a relationship. I had felt with a different distributor like I was taking a deli ticket for service, taking a deli ticket for sales. And I have shown that mutual respect and, sent them other business and taking care of them as much as I can, pay my invoices early, at worst on time. And now when I call for service, I have a technician the next day versus going on the board and sitting on the board for, my first couple of weeks in business when I didn't have any credibility. I waited almost a month to get service. And that's when I was trying to just get my place to a point of some level of satisfaction. So those little things go a long way. I hate to say how basic this is, but just being nice to folks in the office. The folks in the office hold all the keys to the castle of, getting you service, sales, etc. Being nice to them knowing who you are will make you stand out. I can't tell you how many times when I've called in for service, the person on the other end of the phone is laughing or just maybe in a bad mood because an owner has just gone off on them or been high maintenance for things that are not the service provider's problem. So that goes a very long way. And I think that's been overlooked throughout the past couple of years with COVID and everything, of just, treating people like a human, being just nice and normal and not taking out any other problems you have on somebody that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, treat your suppliers like partners. I mean, like Christmas party tonight, I've got my sign guy's going to be there, the HVAC guy's going to be there. Like not every conversation's super pleasant, but I don't know. Like Whitey's point, treat them like you want to be treated.
Yeah, I mean, throw them, buy them lunch. I had Yetis made. I had, the T-shirts, sent T-shirts to Ryan and his team that came out to service the laundromat. Got a text message from him. Hey, thanks so much. This was sweet. Didn't expect it. Just the little things. And by the way, all these different providers have a huge network and a huge presence that you never know when they will put you on a radio ad that they have an ad read. Because this happened to me recently where Ryan gave me a radio ad and texted me and said, hey, pay attention at, the top of the hour on this show. I saw a severe uptick in business that I never, ever could have dreamed of. And other than continuing to support him and being a great customer, I'm indebted to him. That's something that people now know me as somebody that was on a popular radio show through just being a good customer. And there's a quote out there: a customer is more likely to become your friend than a friend is to become your customer. And I strongly believe, my electrician and I were on the phone earlier because I need some work done. And we start off the conversation, how you doing? How's things going? Etc. And like John said, treat them like a partner, treat them like they're an extension. They're, your right-hand man in the business, and you will see fruitful results.
I mean, my key suppliers have stores to my key suppliers have keys to our stores. Keys got me. But I trust them. I have their cell phone number, and I don't have to go visit when they go there. I mean, you talk about, in and out of the business. That frees up a lot of time when you don't have to be there for them to get in the door, or you do auto door locks like Whitey.
That's
best investment ever.
Awesome. I mean, I love that philosophy. And, I've just found that, not only is it the right thing to do to treat people right and take care of them and all that, but it opens a lot of opportunities. Like you said, they're going to show up when you need them to, which is not nothing, especially these days. I know here in LA, but all over, we got a shortage of like repair technicians, right? And so it's hard to find good ones, hard to keep them around, but taking care of them once you got them, it's huge to keep them around. But it also opens up opportunities for you, like being on the radio or deals coming your way. And they're a good source of data because they're going to a lot of different laundromats a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
And so if somebody's looking to sell or getting ready to sell or frustrated, they might pass that along to you. So awesome. One other question that I have before we jump into down to business is, so Whitey, I know you said that you had some creative financing going on with your deals. John, how are you financing all these deals in 11 years? Are you doing creative stuff, like seller financing type stuff, or are you getting loans? Are you a baller and just paying cash for all these things? How's this working?
Buy them cheap. No, so like our first one actually was a good jump start for us. bought it in 2020. Did an SBA loan. We had a connection with the local bank through one of my partners, and we actually were able to get some CARES Act money through that one. We did a kind of a lower AM, and our goal was just to pay it off. The next two were just traditional financing. The fourth, fifth, and sixth ones were SBA as well. I actually met my banker at the blackjack table in Deadwood, South Dakota. Young guy, I think he was a teller then, and now he's a VP of a bank. So we take a little credit in that one. He's coming to the Christmas party too. But I will say, and I said this to the kids at Mississippi State when I got to go down there and talk to them about entrepreneurship. If you're just starting out in this thing, find a banker and find one that you trust and treat them like a partner. I oversend financial stuff, way oversend to them. Like they know just as much about that business as my partner, or our businesses are my partners do. And tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you develop a trust, and then I'm able to go write deals and then come back to them and ask for forgiveness versus permission. And because there's a trust factor that we're not going to make a bad deal. Recently, we're kind of getting out of the SBA game, but although there is some stuff out there that's really interesting, Whitey's looking at it now too, is SBA's got a program where if you're expanding, you can do zero down. So if you're expanding in the same NAICS code that your entity exists in, or is classified as, you can do a zero down. If the real estate's over 50% of the value, you can do a 25-year loan. Rates aren't very awesome right now, but it would have been harder if our first one was at 9%. But now that we've got a couple paid off and all that, we're able to kind of absorb a little bit of that. So traditional debt financing has been the strategy, with accelerated debt payoff. That's what we're trying to do right now.
Nice. Awesome. All right, let's jump into down to business. This is where we can get a little more details about your guys' businesses. So Whitey, let's start with you. What's it cost to do laundry in your neck of the woods, or can you talk about pricing?
Yeah, so one of the things to keep in mind, I took over the zombie mat and we were grossly underpriced. And, when I say grossly underpriced, we were $1.50 cheaper on some of the machines than, everybody in the area. But for a 60 pounder, we're at around $9, and then down to, top loaders, $4.75. What I'll tell folks is when you think about $9 versus $4.75, you've got to look at it two ways, and then they cascade down. One of them, see folks a lot ask in Facebook groups, what do I price? Go and secret shop all of your competitors. You don't want to be the cheapest like I was. When I took over, I was just so cheap, and the stair climb to be at a reasonable level took a couple years. So go and get a feel for the market. But then also back to our prior discussion about inputs to those machines, take into account what machines require. The reason my top loaders are, $4.75 is they require more water than most of the other machines in my store. I've got top loaders, Horizons, 30s and 60s, but the top loaders are really water heavy. And folks love top loaders. I know the industry feels as though top loaders need to be sunset. My position on it is, if they are willing to pay $4.75 for a machine and they want to come to me versus my competitor, I'm never going to get rid of something that is used with 2 to 4 turns a day every single day. Everybody else pull them out. I will happily still have them. They will just be priced based on my inputs.
Yeah, I love that. How did you get from being so severely underpriced to getting it up to, did you have a strategy? You were like, hey, I'm going to raise it X amount of money at X time frame, or how did you do that?
I have followed unintentionally, but it's going to sound intentional with the explanation. When I first took over, the staircase to where I am at now, I slowly started by way of improvements. So one of the big areas that needed improvement was the top loaders and my 60 pounders. And that's the reason I called those two out specifically. Is the top loaders were at $3 and I think it was $3.25 or $3 flat when I first took over. My top loaders are actually more than my Horizons. My Horizons, and this is something I learned from some folks at Alliance, is Horizons should never be more expensive than a top loader. That's just based on inputs, water, power, gas, etc. in my case. So my first increase coincided with me taking over, putting, all the automation in place, etc. So not necessarily visible to, the laundry experience, but visible to the infrastructure surrounding the folks. From there, I have coincided my price increases with the improvement of the store. So for example, I did a price increase in January when my first full year I bought in the fall. My first January, that first increase. My next increase coincided with my retool. Next increase after that coincided with my credit card reader. So I'm basically following a trailing 6 to 7 month increase cycle. To John's point earlier, I did jam in one increase off cycle to my twice a year increase when my utility provider raised rates astronomically on gas and electrical in the Northeast. Side note on that, it was very funny when customer asked me, what's going on, and I said, there's a lot of market changes, and they kind of dug into it a little bit further than I would have liked. To your point, Jordan, try to keep it simple. The customer was dumbfounded that commercial businesses would also face increases similar to a consumer. So that my prior point about folks not being, business owners or not thinking we're treated the same. We face the same pressures at home and in business. So it's been a gradual process. As I mentioned before, I faced a lot of pushback off my first increase. Got very used to the fact that I can't let anything bother me here. It's not necessarily personal, although it felt personal. One instance was somebody called, just completely laid into me, walked around, took pictures of every machine out of order, used words I'd rather not use on the podcast, and just blanketly told me that I will fail, and I will fail fast with the approach I'm taking. I personally took that as motivation and took it as part of my first couple of years. So I would encourage folks, like I said, figure out what your costs are to do business, figure out the market. And then, as John pointed out and kept me honest on, is if something changes, don't worry about getting that climb. You will retain the customers you want to keep. You will lose customers that you may not have wanted to retain. There is nothing wrong with firing customers. It's, seems kind of weird to mention it that way, but I have noticed as I have elevated my store's experience, the problems I faced my first year in business have really minimized, and the issues that were plaguing me for the first 6 to 12 months now are very random versus weekly, monthly, quarterly, by way of homeless issues or just folks disrespecting the store, or being just not the customers I want to keep.
Yeah. A lot of times the biggest headache are the people who want to pay the least amount of money, and it's just better to let them go to that.
Let them go.
Price leader
It's
down
not.
the road.
There's something to be said about keeping people you want happy, throwing them a free wash. Something I don't think I've touched on that I recently did. I put out disinfecting wipes, spick and span, and paper towels, and a couple cleaning, accessories, mop bucket, dustpan, and brush. My cleaners that I have go in, I have a cleaning team, awesome crew that goes in at night. Half the time they'll text me and say, was there anybody even in here today? Because folks will now go around and clean the place after others or after themselves, because they know that's the standard I have set when they walk in and it's accessible to them. And they'll say, we love these products. It's not expensive buying it in bulk or buying it via commercial account. I now know people expect to see that, and I have no problem leaving that, knowing they're used correctly and they're not just stealing the paper towels or stealing the spick and span that you could go buy a Dollar Tree for $1.25 if you really need it that badly, but take it if you're going to keep doing your wash for, $9 on a 60 pounder. Happy to let it walk out the front door.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can't keep anything in my laundromat. I put brooms out. I put cleaning supplies out. People just steal them, so I stopped doing that. John, you want to comment on how are you approaching pricing? What's your sort of pricing philosophy at your stores?
Be the cleanest in town, then you can be the highest in town, and it's fine. I have a real life example of that of a recent acquisition. The the washers had never been raised since being installed, which was 13 years ago. And so you can imagine, I mean, we were, kind of half of what Whitey's talking about. And so when you look at today's bills, I mean, you got to run a business, right? So we went in and day one made some changes, and we had a note left for us. And the place was okay. It wasn't clean to the standards that we have set at all our core stores. And we do soap boxes daily and all that, right? So this needed a little TLC. And my partner Tyler and our new cleaning team, they got this place looking awesome. But basically, the night before that, we got left a note, and the note said, "No problem on the price increase as long as you get this place clean." So I say that as an example of, you can't charge whatever you want, but if you go to a fast food burger place, they're going to have or McDonald's, okay? You can get the double cheeseburger, that's like the cheap cheeseburger, for $2 or $3. It used to be $1, now it's $3. Or you can order the Primo, the Big Mac, or whatever, and it's like $7 or $8. I'm going to be the $7 or $8 all day, every day, but when you're going to like the cheeseburger, and it's going to be the best meat, the whole thing. So that's kind of how we've approached pricing. You definitely never want to be the cheapest, but if you're going to charge a premium, make sure that the service that they're getting is premium, and you don't have a lot of out of order signs and all that kind of stuff. So that's our philosophy. Clean, efficient, friendly. It's everywhere. We got a stencil everywhere. Ballpark, we're maybe just a touch less than Whitey on some of the examples he gave. But have gone up significantly. Case in point, the store I just talked about. So, ultimately, I'm a big supply and demand guy. So, at the end of the day, there's a cliff to where if you raise too much, you're going to lose volume, and you got to run a P&L. You got to say, hey, I'm going to go up 20%. And am I okay? The P&L actually looks pretty good if you only lose 20% of your customers. You don't really want that to happen. The win is you retain everybody. So that's just around your operations and making sure you run a good one. So, our philosophy is we want to run a premium store and charge for that service.
Awesome. We got another segment of the podcast called Secret Sauce, and Secret Sauce is, what is your best piece of advice, or maybe something that's working in your store or stores that other owners can implement to help them grow their businesses? Why do you want to kick us off?
I think the biggest thing that I implore people to do is network in your local community. Everybody in the area should know who you are. Get yourself out there. Join your local business association. If you have a chamber of commerce, get involved wherever you can, that you can piggyback on advertising and getting your name out there. So for example, my local business association pumps social media posts that you tag them in. So every time I make a post on Instagram and Facebook, it goes out to their thousands of followers just because I paid my, yearly membership fee. That's not an extra, cost to have that visibility. That has increased my ability to get to new markets. In terms of, when I say new markets, folks that are the casual customer, they do comforters, or their machine breaks, they see that I I'm a part of that business association, sponsoring the odd event every once in a while, within your budgetary constraints of, last year there was a Christmas event that I helped sponsor. And then I helped sponsor another event, not necessarily expensive events that your name is attached to a beer cup, I think is what my sponsorship went towards. So everybody that came to this event in my time frame received a cup with my name on it. Now, they were potentially intoxicated because it was a beer garden, and it was the type of cup that you may not have brought home because you didn't want to have it in your car, but everybody saw my business logo at this beer garden, and I was, a title sponsor, whatever it's called. So joining those local associations, being a part of the community, and then just networking. As I mentioned before, my way of acquisition was through a family friend. A longtime mentor of mine owns a store. I never knew he had a store. I've worked for this gentleman. I grew up in the community with his kids. Had no clue. His stance is nobody asked, so why do I share? I don't need to share. Private person, but you don't know who knows who. Or to your point earlier, Jordan, and John has touched on this as well, it could lead to you picking up new acquisitions, or if you're in a market where it makes sense, connect with your fellow owners. You never know who knows somebody else in a certain area or who could eventually make a game-changing decision that could help your business or propel you to a different light. As I mentioned before, I'm a good customer of a plumber. I'm on his radio ad read. So, just these little things that, are not hard. It may not be your personality. So you've got to find what fits for you, but put yourself in a position to be known in your community as best as you can and as quick as you can. I think that's the other thing. I was a little slow on this because my store was a zombie mat. I didn't have a lot to show for it. I had to get really creative the first few months before I retooled. Now that I have retooled and continue to retool, very easy to be very visually appealing. And before I forget, get yourself on Google My Business. I fought for 18 months. I lost years off my life fighting with them because they didn't think I existed. John's heard the stories of me venting about this, but get listed on Google My Business, no matter what it takes. If you run into issues with them, we're going to get into a little bit of a mini secret sauce, but be really nice to them. I bypassed the whole process because I just finally cold emailed and just said, what will it take to get listed? I will take a picture of myself in a lobster suit in my store, in front of my store, pointing to my store hours and name. If that is required, I was listed within 2 days. So get yourself as visible as possible, social media, etc. You don't need to do anything creative. You don't need to do anything crazy. You don't need to hire a team. If that's within your budget or you want to, great. I just do it all myself. And people are like, oh, do you have a team behind you? And I said, nope, it's me tossing ideas with some buddies in the industry, or I see something that works for somebody else and I run with it.
Cool. Good advice. Shoot over that picture of you in the lobster suit. John, what? I'm just kidding. John, what advice do you have for current owners?
Perfection's the enemy of profit. We run an imperfect business. Stuff's going to break. You're going to have a bad day. Deal with it in real time. So I think that's been one of our things is, we've set up a partnership and a team structure to where, I can be in Florida for a month. It'd be nice, whatever. And maybe how I would address a particular situation. I've got multiple people that are empowered to address that situation, and they're going to do it in the manner that they see fit. And 90% of the time, we would have come to the same outcome. 10% of the time, different. And then you just figure out that 10%. We had a saying in my old corporate gig, was just speed trumps accuracy. So if you've got 80% of the data, don't wait for the other 20%. Make the decision, make it fast. So I think a lot of that applies in laundromats is, you get a customer issue, address it then. Don't let the list build up. Just stay a little bit ahead of it. And if you can't get to it, ask your partner to do it or set up a backup system. With pretty much every task we've got at least 3 people for that store that can do that fast, to where one can be gone, one's going to be sick, one's going to get COVID. But yeah, I would just say we talk about it all the time. Let the P&L be the guide. Doesn't always have to be the answer, but we run an imperfect business, and if you try to run it perfectly, you're going to drive yourself nuts, and you're not going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, I love that. Great advice. Also, another segment we have of the podcast is Pro Tips. What's your best piece of advice for somebody trying to get into this business, Whitey?
Go to any events that you can find. Distributors do all sorts of events that are free. Go get familiar. Just be socially awkward and listen, I guess is the best way to describe it. I learned so much. I did this after I had bought my store, but I learned so much being at a distributor's event, just listening to the conversations going on. They offer service schools. You might need to be a customer for that, but immerse yourself in the different facets of the business. Get comfortable with, what the lingo is and understand, what is going on. So there's a lot of free content out there. I immerse myself in this podcast. There's a lot of other podcasts with similar guests or similar just small business style mindset shifts that can help fill the gaps. So just see what's out there readily accessible to you that can help bring you up to speed, with the notion that what works for Mark in Texas, John in the Midwest, myself in New England, Jordan out West, just know that you might need to adapt certain things for what works best for you, and be comfortable trying it and then reverting, or to John's point, figure out what works, the 80% of data when you don't have the 20, and then fix it. There's rarely going to be a time where you can't fix something that you've done in this business where people aren't going to be all over you about it.
Yeah, it's sort of that ready, fire, aim mentality too, of like, get ready to that 80%, shoot, go for it, take action, and then aim after the fact and course correct along the way. So I love that. John, you got any tips for the newbie trying to get their first deal?
A couple things. One, I'd say make your first one a win. Nobody really wants to buy something just to have to keep plugging cash into it. So find the right first deal for yourself. Secondly, don't forget to work on the business. Don't work in the business 100% of the time. In the beginning, you're going to work 99% in the business, but somehow get to appropriate balance on that. And I guess the last thing is have a backup and take a vacation, man. I mean, it can be it's a 365 day. We just said we like to be open 365 days. So have a backup, have a trusted backup, especially if you only got one store, have a family member or whatever, train them, take your family down to Disney World or whatever. Just, if you let the business run the business, don't let it run you.
Ooh, I love
another
that.
Another quick thought, Jordan, in terms of
Yeah.
just, folks looking for their first store is, as I mentioned before, this doesn't stop when you become an owner, but go do laundry, go spend some time sitting in a laundromat, get comfortable with what goes on as a customer. As I mentioned, I did this when I talk to folks that ask me, what's it take to get into the business? One of my questions is, what's your experience with laundromats? Have you been in one? Have you ever used one? What's your perception? And a lot of folks are, I saw, something on TikTok, or I saw a bucket of quarters, or I've heard that there's this notion that it
So
just
passive.
runs itself, or, all these different things. And at the end of the day, just go sit in one, do a load of laundry every week, mix it up, go to different ones, especially when you see the owner, and introduce yourself. Treat it as if you are the customer for a couple weeks, get really familiar, so that when you do get a deal, as John mentioned, you'll figure out if it's a home run being a customer.
Yep.
But you'll also understand some of the customers and how some people interact in the laundromat, or, as I've, alluded to a couple times, you're going to have a lot of preconceived notions that are going to right out the window when you take over. The quicker you can get rid of anything you thought you knew about consumer behavior with the pellets, or, folks wanting to use 6 machines to do 2 loads of laundry and they're willing to pay, the better off you'll be. And that'll really help desensitize you very quickly.
Awesome. Guys, this has been incredible. Really cool to meet you here, kind of voice to voice, face to face a little bit. And, from meeting on Twitter, essentially, to being here on the podcast. So I appreciate you guys taking the time out, especially right before your Christmas party, John, to come out and share your stories and share your wisdom. Really, really appreciate you guys. You guys rock, man.
Hey, Jordan,
Thank you so much.
Awesome, man. Thanks for setting it up.
Thanks for being a great resource for folks in the industry trying to get in. As I mentioned, I had a lot of windshield time my first year of ownership. This was a common podcast in the rotation. What you provide to the industry, the community, is a great, refreshing take, especially when you bring in a very diverse group of owners. Hearing what works for folks that you can translate into your market, or what somebody has tried and failed that you may have been exploring using, really is a service to the community. So I really appreciate what you've done. And as I mentioned in the pre-show, I heard Mark Blaskamp on the show, cold outreached Mark, saw some stuff on the fold, got introduced to Jon. And, as I mentioned, it's been a, open door podcast experience for me to get connected with people I never thought I would. So, a lot of credit to you for a lot of my success, especially in the early days. And, really appreciate your time doing this, and the folks that come on and open up and will share what is going on. And, some people getting very vulnerable. I think there's a real credit to the folks that don't sugarcoat it or don't overlook that, at the end of the day, there are parts of this that are very passive, but there are parts of this that you've got to run into a situation, figure it out, ready, aim, fire, and figure it out later. So really appreciate what you do.
Appreciate it. I'm just going to pass that thanks right along to people like you guys who've been willing to come on and share your stories. So appreciate that. And dude, can't wait to stay connected and hear from you guys again. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. I hope you guys loved that podcast episode with Jon and Whitey. You guys, I'm sure we'll be hearing more from those guys in the future, because, man, you can tell they're just a wealth of knowledge. So I just want to remind you before we chime off on this thing on 2 things. Number 1 is take action on something from this podcast episode. It doesn't matter what, but we've got to take action to accomplish our goals. I feel like I'm beating the same drum, but it's just so important, and I believe in it that much. Take some action. Number 2, hold yourself accountable and let us hold each other accountable. Go post on the Laundromat Resource forums. The link should be in the show notes, laundromatresource.com/show141, or on in the description if you're on YouTube, or if you just go to laundromatresource.com/forums and go to podcast episodes forum, and chime in, talk about what's the action you're going to take this week based off of this episode. I love to share that with each other. All right. I'll see you on the forums, and I'll see you next week. Peace.